The liberals and progressives want all of us to fall into this deception, to fall into the fantasy world, the fantasy island that they are creating. Like the plane, the lies. Constantly, deception. And so they're constantly fear. They're constantly pushing those things and having black people and people in general believe that things are worse now than they were 100 years ago. Thank you so much for liking your comments and subscribing to the channel. Please share this with your friends. Smash that like button. Smash the subscription bell. Share this with everybody you know. We're trying to make sure people understand that they're not victims, that they are empowered for greatness, and all this stuff that's out here that's telling them otherwise is false and will not benefit them in the end. So please, I appreciate that. Share that. So there has been a lot of gnashing of teeth, if you will, since the results of the Virginia race this past Tuesday. You had Glenn Youngkin beating Terry McAuliffe. He had Winsome Sears, a Jamaican black woman, becoming the first black lieutenant governor, a black woman lieutenant governor in Virginia.
I'm telling you that what you are looking at is the American dream. The American dream. When my father came to this country, August 11th of 1963, he came at the height of the civil rights movement from Jamaica. He came and I said to him, but it was such a bad time for us. Why did you come? And he said, because America was where the jobs and the opportunities were. And he only came with $1.75. $1.75. Took any job he could find and he put himself through school and started his American dream. And then, yes, and now he's comfortably retired. And then he came and got me when I was 6 years old. And when I stepped on that Pan Am Boeing 737 and landed at JFK, I landed in a new world. And so let me tell you this. I am not even first generation American. When I joined the Marine Corps, I was still a Jamaican. But this country had done so much for me, I was willing to die for this country. USA! And so I say to you, victory indeed. But I say to you, there are some who want to divide us, and we must not let that happen. They would like us to believe we are back in 1963 when my father came. We can live where we want. We can eat where we want. We own the water fountains. We have had a black president elected not once but twice, and here I am, living proof. In case you haven't noticed, I am black, and I have been black all my life. But that's not what this is about.
And so, when this should be something that should be celebrated. Because if she was a Democrat, this would have made front page news. This would have led all the news stories. But because she's a Republican, it's not. And Democrats and liberals and progressives and unfortunately, some black people are living in a fantasy land. Because if you look at the numbers, Glenn Youngkin actually won 13% of the black vote.
I looked into the numbers here, and I think there are some key things that Youngkin has managed to do in Virginia. One is, look at the black vote. He got 13% of the black vote. Donald Trump in 2020 got 11%. Mitt Romney got 8%. John McCain got 4%. So there is a Republican story to be told about the black community and chipping away and getting more voters to pay attention. Now, understanding that this is a race where the pundits said that Youngkin was blowing the racial dog whistle and that he was trying to get whites and white supremacists engaged in this race. I mean, that's the dynamic in which more black voters voted for the Republican than in the past few times.
But yet, if you turn on MSNBC and listen to Joy Reid, listen to Rachel Maddow, excuse me, Rachel Maddow. And if you listen to the host here, you would think that we're back in 1920, that white supremacy is running rampant. And the reason why Glenn Youngkin and the reason why Winsome Sears won is not because they ran on policy of empowering parents to make choices in terms of what their students are being taught. Not because they ran on policies understanding that we want babies to live in the womb. Not because they ran on policies to help alleviate the pain that people are feeling at the pump. No. You guys don't get it. It's all about white supremacy. Don't you know America is systemically racist? Don't you know America is full of racists, and Virginia just showed the true colors of America?
There is no clearer snapshot of where a country stands, who it is, and what it wants than the results of an election. And that's why your timeline is bogged down with these hot takes and a wake-up call about woke politics and who's to blame, and why the pundits are throwing the panic room wide open for the Democrats. One of the takeaways you definitely saw was how the election, in particular the one in Virginia, was a referendum on the left's failure to deliver their agenda. A rebuke on everything from critical race theory to the Democrats' election strategy. But let's be honest, here's the thing. All those takes are like searching the edges while refusing to see what's staring right back at you. And I can assure you, black voters in Virginia are not shocked by the so-called Youngkin shocker. This isn't about enthusiasm. This isn't about Democrats not doing enough to exercise their base. And this definitely is not about messaging or even about beloved. This is about the fact that a good chunk of voters out there are okay with white supremacy. Let's call a thing a thing. Actually, scratch that. They are more than okay. This afternoon, reporter Yamiche Alcindor asked President Biden about the results. She clearly understood the assignment.
What's your message, though, for Democratic voters, especially black voters, who see Republicans running on race, education, lying about critical race theory, and they're worried that Democrats don't have an effective way to push back on that?
Well, I think that the whole answer is just to speak the truth, lay out where we are.
Voters are a reflection of their voters. It isn't looking so great for the once grand old party, is it? Now, the elected lieutenant governor in Virginia hates a woman's right to choose, but live from the Sunken Place, she certainly loves her guns. And while a trigger-happy congresswoman says she gave birth in a truck, so obviously no one else deserves parental leave, because in the bizarro world, that's logical. And yet the election narrative piercing through the timeline is how Democrats better be concerned. And we're here to say, no, that ain't it. America is who should be concerned, because this group, the Republican Party and the voters who empower them, has the sole agenda of suppressing the other group to hold on to its power. By forcing voter suppression laws that expunge and even penalize black and brown participation, they can erase white supremacy from the history books. Why not? Because the governors will comply. They can take up arms. Why not? The judges will protect them. And speaking of judges, we have the conservative court putting abortion rights on the chopping block, at which point we have to ask, who are we anymore? And we got the answer last night. This is very much who America is and always has been. And there's nothing shocking about it.
So you see, as Tiffany Cross, the MSNBC host, mentions, it's not about policy, why the Republicans won. The Republicans are a threat to democracy. They are a threat to America. And they would totally disregard that Youngkin got 13% of the black vote. It is like the liberals and progressives want all of us to fall into this deception, to fall into the fantasy world, the fantasy island that they are creating. Like the plane, the lies. Constantly. Deception. And so they're constantly fear. They're constantly pushing those things. And having black people and people in general believe that things are worse now than they were 100 years ago. But it's all intentional because they want to balkanize us, separate us, so they can destroy America and rebuild it in the image of a socialist, Marxist, communist society. Why else do they keep harping on history and talking about critical race theory? You know, they're not really teaching quote unquote critical race theory, but they are implementing it. They're indoctrinating it into the curriculum. That's what cultural responsive education is. Cultural and historical responsive education is. It's taking critical race theory concepts and implementing them into the curriculum in the schools. They may not call it critical race theory, but that doesn't mean that the concepts and the thought and the worldview is not being taught, but it is. But it's like a fantasy island. They want us to live in this fantasy world, this world which is satanic, which is deceptive, which is demonic, that sees everything through the prism of race, that there's no redemption for anybody, that anything that happens that they don't agree with is white supremacy. She even said that Winsome Sears, who she has a picture of holding a gun, is from the Sunken Place. So now you disparage a woman of color. Why do we do that? Why is she saying something negative about this woman instead of applauding and celebrating her for winning? She said that she arose from the Sunken Place. If you don't know what that is, that's a reference to the movie Get Out, where black folks who were held captive by white people. But the funny thing about it is, she mentions the Sunken Place. She's actually in the Sunken Place because the people that were depicted in that movie were liberals. But she wouldn't tell you that. They were liberals. And so that movie actually applies to liberals just as much as it does conservatives. So she's in more of a sunken place than anybody else, if you want to be real about it. She is living from the sunken place. They're all speaking this stuff from the sunken place. If you want to talk about that movie and make a movie reference, you're living from that sunken place because you're living in this reality that is not true, that is based on lies, that is based on deception, and is leading this country to destruction, and individually is leading people to hell. Because people are rejecting biblical values all for the sake of grouping together and having this groupthink because they want quote unquote power. They value the opinions and thoughts of men more than the opinions and thoughts of God. They value the opinions and thoughts of men more than the opinions and thoughts of God. And so therefore they will reject and denounce and repudiate any reference to their biblical upbringing, any reference to biblical values, all for the sake of wokeness, all for the sake of the woke supremacy. We are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. These people want to put us in a constant state of victimization, a constant state of being aggrieved, a constant state of being oppressed, so they can manipulate and use us. But I'm glad the voters in Virginia, and in particular 13% of the black voters in Virginia, spoke up and said, no, I reject this. Because we have to reject this. Because we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. And this is just the beginning. There's going to be a change in this nation to reject all of this fantasy island stuff, all this true sunken place stuff, all this stuff that's rising from the pit of hell, to convince people that they are oppressed and they are oppressors, instead of they were created in the image of God and they can do all things because God exists in them, that the greater one lives inside of them. We have to reject that. We are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. And we have to stand up for biblical truth and push back against all this fantasy island, all these lies, all these deception, all these things that are not true, because we serve the greater one. Because we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness.